Marcus Thompson settled into his first-class seat, his fingers gliding across his phone screen as he reviewed the final details of a $50 million acquisition. The leather seat creaked softly as he adjusted his position, his well-worn Patagonia vest and jeans a stark contrast to the usual suits that populated the first-class cabin. He'd learned long ago that true power didn't need designer labels. His $4.2 billion net worth spoke louder than any outfit could. The pre-flight bustle filled the cabin of Flight AA-714 to San Francisco. Flight attendant Karen Wheeler was already having a rough day. 3 passengers had tried sneaking into first class, and her patience was wearing thin. When she spotted Marcus, her tired eyes immediately narrowed with suspicion. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice carrying that practiced flight attendant sweetness with an edge underneath. "I believe you may be in the wrong section." She gestured toward the economy cabin behind the curtain. Marcus looked up from his phone, where he was in the middle of texting his CFO about the deal. "Good morning," he said with a warm smile. "Could I get some water before takeoff, please?" The calm request only seemed to irritate Karen further. "Sir, I'll need to see your boarding pass first." Her fingers drummed against her service card as Marcus continued his phone call, discussing profit margins and integration timelines. "Just a moment," he said to both Karen and his phone, reaching for his pocket. But before he could retrieve his boarding pass, Karen's frustration boiled over. In a moment she would replay in her mind countless times afterward. She reached out and swatted the phone from his hand. The device clattered to the floor, its screen now sporting a spiderweb of cracks. The first-class cabin fell silent. All eyes turned to watch the scene unfold. Other passengers began pulling out their phones, sensing the drama that was about to unfold. But what happened next surprised everyone. Marcus didn't yell. He didn't threaten. Instead, he slowly bent down, picked up his phone, and began recording. "Could you please state your full name and employee ID number?" he asked, his voice as calm as if he were ordering coffee. Karen's face drained of color as the reality of what she'd done began to sink in. She'd just assaulted a passenger. And not just any passenger, but one sitting in first class with an aura of quiet authority she was only now beginning to recognize. In the background, other passengers murmured and shook their heads. A businessman across the aisle mouthed, "I got it all on video," to Marcus, who acknowledged him with a slight nod. The situation had escalated far beyond a simple seating misunderstanding, and everyone knew it. Karen's hands trembled as she reached for her employee ID badge, the reality of her actions crashing down around her. But before she could speak, her supervisor, James, rushed down the aisle. Word traveled fast on an airplane, especially when a first-class incident involved a slapped phone and shocked passengers. "Sir, I profoundly apologize," James said, addressing Marcus. "Please, if you'll allow me to handle this situation." He gestured for Karen to step aside, her face now a mix of embarrassment and growing fear as she recognized the gravity of her actions. Marcus held up his hand, his phone still recording. "First, I'd like to understand something." He turned to Karen, his voice measured and calm. "What made you assume I didn't belong in first class?" The question hung in the air like heavy smoke. Several passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. An older woman 2 rows back whispered, "Oh my," just loud enough to be heard. Karen's mouth opened and closed, no words coming out. The implied accusation in Marcus's question was impossible to miss. Finally, she managed to stammer, I've had several people try to sneak into first class today." "And what made you think I was one of them?" Marcus pressed, still maintaining his composure. "Was it my vest, my jeans, or perhaps something else?" By now, Marcus's phone was buzzing continuously. His executive team, already alerted to the situation, was mobilizing. The airline's corporate office was receiving calls from Thompson Tech's legal department. In the digital age, news traveled faster than planes. James, recognizing the potential PR nightmare unfolding, tried to salvage the situation. "Sir, We'll have to remove Ms. Wheeler from this flight. I assure you, American Airlines has zero tolerance for—" "Actually," Marcus interrupted, finally putting down his phone, "I don't want her removed." A murmur of surprise rippled through the cabin. "What I want is something more meaningful than a quick punishment." He reached into his laptop bag and pulled out a business card. Simple, black, with only his name and Thompson Tech CEO printed in silver. Karen's eyes widened as recognition finally hit her. She just slapped the phone of a man whose company was featured in Fortune magazine last month. "Sometimes," Marcus continued, addressing both Karen and the growing audience of passengers, "we need to turn these moments into opportunities for real change." He handed the card to James. "Have your corporate office call mine. I think it's time we had a serious discussion about implementing some changes in staff training." Within hours of Marcus's confrontation with Karen, the incident had already sparked intense discussions in American Airlines corporate headquarters. Emergency meetings were called, and Thompson Tech's influence as a major corporate client added unprecedented pressure to address the situation properly. Marcus sat in his San Francisco office the next morning, reviewing the viral video that had already gathered millions of views. His phone hadn't stopped ringing since landing. News outlets, civil rights organizations, and corporate leaders all wanted his take on the incident. But Marcus had bigger plans than just media attention. Karen, meanwhile, spent a sleepless night expecting termination. Instead, she received an unexpected email, an invitation to meet with Marcus and the airline's diversity training team. Her hands shook as she read it, tears streaming down her face as relief mixed with shame. The meeting room was tense when Karen arrived. She found Marcus already there, sitting casually at the conference table, still in his trademark vest. "Please, sit down," he said warmly, gesturing to the chair across from him. The airline's HR director and diversity officer sat nearby, looking both nervous and curious. "I've been thinking about yesterday," Marcus began, his voice gentle but firm, "about how many others might have faced similar treatment but lacked the platform to address it. This isn't just about you and me anymore." Karen nodded, fighting back tears. "I've barely slept," she admitted. "I keep replaying it in my mind, wondering how I could have been so biased." Marcus finished for her. "We all have biases, Karen. The real question is, what do we do about them?" He pulled out a tablet and showed her something that made her eyes widen, a comprehensive proposal for a new training program, with her story as its centerpiece. "Instead of firing you," Marcus continued, "I want you to be part of the solution. Your experience, your journey of recognition and change, it could help thousands of others understand their own biases." The airline executives exchanged surprised looks. This wasn't the ruthless revenge they'd expected from a billionaire who'd been publicly humiliated. Instead, Marcus was offering something far more powerful, a chance for genuine transformation. The impact of the viral video spread like wildfire through social media. Within 24 hours, #FirstClassBias and #ThompsonTech were trending worldwide. Marcus's inbox flooded with messages, some from civil rights leaders praising his composure, others from business leaders curious about his next move. In American Airlines headquarters, emergency meetings stretched into the night. Their biggest corporate client had been humiliated, and the PR nightmare was growing by the minute. Marcus received 11 calls from their CEO, but he let them all go to voicemail. He was busy crafting something bigger than an apology. Karen spent the day in HR meetings, expecting termination. Instead, she found herself facing a different kind of consequence. Marcus had requested she remain employed, but with a condition. She would become the face of their new training initiative. The video reached 50 million views. News channels dissected every moment. Karen's assumption, the slap, Marcus's calm response. But what caught everyone's attention was his latest tweet. "Change doesn't come from canceling people. It comes from transforming them." Thompson Tech's legal team prepared documents, not for a lawsuit, but for a partnership. Marcus proposed a revolutionary training program, using virtual reality to help airline staff experience bias from both perspectives. The cost, $10 million, funded entirely by Thompson Tech. Karen's hands shook as she read the proposal. Instead of public shame, she was being offered a chance at redemption. "We'll use your experience," Marcus explained in their first meeting, "to prevent thousands of others from making the same mistake." The airline's board unanimously approved the program. As news spread of this unexpected response, Thompson Tech's stock price surged. Marcus had turned a moment of personal humiliation into a masterclass in corporate responsibility and human transformation. 3 months passed since the infamous slap incident, and American Airlines underwent a remarkable transformation. The new training program, born from that tense moment in first class, was revolutionizing how the airline handled diversity and bias awareness. Karen found herself standing before a room of 200 flight attendants, her voice steady as she shared her story. The same hands that had swatted Marcus's phone now held a microphone, spreading a message of change. "I thought I was just doing my job," she explained to the captivated audience, "but I was actually acting on assumptions I didn't even know I had." The training sessions, co-developed by Thompson Tech's Diversity Division, went far beyond typical corporate workshops. They included virtual reality simulations where staff experienced bias from both sides, real-world scenario training, and frank discussions about unconscious prejudices. Marcus made occasional surprise appearances at these sessions, not as the billionaire CEO who was wronged, but as a partner in progress. His presence transformed what could have been mandatory corporate training into powerful moments of genuine connection and understanding. The airline's internal metrics showed promising results. Customer complaints about discriminatory treatment dropped by 45% in just 3 months. Staff reported feeling more equipped to handle diverse situations, and employee satisfaction scores rose significantly. Karen, once afraid she'd become a cautionary tale, instead became a symbol of transformation. Other major airlines began reaching out, wanting to implement similar programs. What started as a moment of bias was becoming a movement of change. "Sometimes the best revenge," Marcus often said during these sessions, "is helping someone become a better version of themselves." The nods of agreement from both Karen and the attendees showed that his message was hitting home. One training session at a time. 6 months into the training program's success, American Airlines faced an unexpected challenge. A competitor airline experienced a similar bias incident that went viral. The media immediately turned to American Airlines, expecting them to gloat over their progress. Instead, Marcus and Karen did something remarkable. They reached out to the competing airline and offered their training program, free of charge. "Bias isn't a competitive advantage," Marcus announced at a joint press conference. "It's a shared challenge we all need to tackle together." The industry was stunned. Karen, now promoted to Director of Diversity Training Implementation, led the charge in sharing their successful methods. She traveled across the country, her story becoming more powerful with each telling. "6 months ago, I was the problem," she would say. "Today, I'm part of the solution." The program evolved beyond just airline staff. Airports began implementing similar training for security personnel, check-in staff, and even retail workers. What started as one incident in first class was reshaping how the entire aviation industry approached bias awareness. Marcus's company stock soared as Thompson Tech became known not just for technology, but for social innovation. Corporate clients worldwide sought their expertise in transforming workplace incidents into opportunities for growth. The training sessions now included interactive elements where participants shared their own biases and learning moments. Karen's openness about her journey encouraged others to be equally honest. "The hardest part," she often said, "isn't admitting you were wrong. It's committing to do better every single day." By year's end, over 50,000 airline employees had gone through the program, each one left with a changed perspective and practical tools for combating bias. The aviation industry, once notorious for discrimination complaints, was becoming a model for corporate cultural change. 1 year after the viral incident, Marcus Thompson stood on stage at the Global Aviation Leadership Summit. The auditorium was packed with industry executives, all eager to hear from the billionaire who turned a moment of discrimination into a movement for change. Today, Marcus began, we're not here to talk about that viral video. We're here to celebrate what happened after the cameras stopped rolling. He gestured toward the side of the stage, where Karen Wheeler waited. The audience erupted in applause as she joined him. Karen, now a respected figure in corporate diversity training, looked nothing like the frightened flight attendant from a year ago. She carried herself with confidence, her journey from viral infamy to industry leader evident in every step. When Mr. Thompson's phone hit the floor that day, Karen addressed the crowd. Something else shattered too, my own preconceptions about bias. Her voice carried through the silent auditorium. But instead of breaking me, that moment rebuilt me. The presentation included real data, over 100,000 aviation employees trained, discrimination complaints down 70% industry-wide, and employee satisfaction scores at record highs. But the most powerful moment came when Marcus shared the security footage from that fateful flight, not to shame, but to show how far they'd come. True revenge, Marcus concluded, isn't about destroying someone who wronged you. It's about destroying the system that made them think their actions were okay. The audience rose in a standing ovation as Marcus and Karen stood together, living proof that the right response to bias isn't punishment, it's progress. As they left the stage, reporters clamored for interviews, but Marcus and Karen shared a knowing look. Their story had evolved beyond headlines. It had become a blueprint for turning confrontation into conversation, bias into bridge building, and mistakes into meaningful change.